Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started this morning. It's 10:01, so we'll have it recorded for those who want to join in or come into it. So welcome to Information Tuesday. I'm going to start off with Catherine. Catherine, if you want to unmute yourself. There
Yes,
you go.
we were struggling with the sound. I would just like to introduce Lauren Robertson. She is the consultant dietitian for Northern Kentucky Area Development District, and she assists with menu analysis, updates, and revisions, and the nutrition education component of Kentucky's nutrition program for their district. She's also helping me with the malnutrition screening project as well. And Lauren lives in Lexington, Kentucky with her husband, James, and 2 dogs. So I'm thrilled to have her do this for us, and hopefully we'll have a lot of resources that you all can use.
Thank you, Lauren, for joining us.
Thank you, Catherine. Thanks, buddy. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So to get started, I wanted to give a little bit of an overview of the menu updates for Wesley and changes that were made to the menu for the senior nutrition program. Buddy, if you'll click to the next slide, please. Before I do that, I just wanted to give a quick overview of the nutrient requirements, just to give some background. So as far as calories go, no meal may be less than 625 calories, with the average acceptable range being 675 to 735 calories. Protein should be 15 to 25% of total calories, and the acceptable carbohydrate range is 85 to 105 grams per meal. The fat content over a week, when it's average, should be less than or equal to 30% of total calories, with no more than 35%. And salt is 1,200 milligrams per meal or less, with the weekly average being 1,000 milligrams or less. So those are the main nutrients that I wanted to just touch base and focus on, but there are lots of other components to the nutrient requirements. So just to give some background. And next slide, please. Okay, so as far as the menu update and revisions for Wesley, all of the menus were updated. So in addition to the regular menu, the 5 therapeutic or restricted menus were updated as well. And the findings from the first round, as far as nutrient analysis goes, a lot of the meals tended to have not enough protein content or a little bit too much fat content. So we worked together with Wesley to come up with menus and entrees and sides that meet those nutrient requirements. Next slide, please. So the new menu follows a 4-week menu rotation as it did before. The entrees are similar, but the main changes had to do with adding more protein, whether that was increasing the serving size of the high protein foods already on the entree, or adding a peanut butter cup or peanut butter and crackers, something easy to increase the grams of protein in that meal. Also, high-fat desserts like the mixed berry crisp, the Oreos, the lemon and oatmeal cookie, and others were omitted and replaced with low-fat alternatives like sherbet, fruit, yogurt, and cottage cheese. And then at this time, we are looking into a low-fat margarine spread, in addition to low salt cheese for the burger, so we didn't have to lose the cheese. So those are the main changes that we made. Next slide, please. So moving on to talking about keeping food tasty without salt. That seems to be a struggle for a lot of us. So I'm going to talk about different ways that we can flavor food so that it still tastes good for our clients without increasing the salt content. Next slide, please. So this is just an overview of what I plan on talking about. I wanted to, explain what is salt and what are the consequences when we eat too much of it. I think it's really important to kind of have that background, moving forward so that we know why it's important that we keep the salt content down. I'll identify some foods that are high in salt, and then talk about low salt alternatives to enhancing the flavor of foods, and then other ways that we can cut back on the salt. Next slide, please. So just a brief overview. Salt and sodium are used interchangeably a lot, but they're not the same thing. So I wanted to point out the difference between the two. So salt, or sodium chloride, is a crystal compound that's found in nature, and it's mainly used to flavor food. So that's what we consider to be table salt that we use when we cook. And then sodium, on the other hand, is actually a mineral. So just something to kind of think about. Next slide, please. So consequences of too much salt. What happens when we consume too much salt in our diet? Probably a lot of you are familiar with the high blood pressure associated with too much salt intake. And the high blood pressure is actually a leading cause of cardiovascular disease. So it can lead to some of these other consequences that I've got listed here. Heart attack, stroke, heart failure. And in fact, high blood pressure accounts for 2/3 of all strokes and half of heart disease. Too much salt can also lead to kidney damage and can impact bone health. So it's important that we limit salt intake in the foods that we provide to our clients so that they can be as healthy as possible. Next slide, please. So just some common foods that are high in salt. Lots of the commercially processed or prepared foods that we like to think of as convenience foods, tend to be high in salt. More specifically, like frozen meals, pre-made dishes like macaroni and cheese, Stouffer's lasagna, things like that. And then boxed entrees or side items tend to be high in salt, not only for the taste, but also to help with the preservation, to keep it good for longer. Canned foods also tend to be high in salt for much of the same reasons. So canned soup and canned vegetables have a lot of salt. Cheeses too, especially yellow cheeses. Lighter cheeses like provolone, mozzarella, and Swiss tend to be lower in salt content. Lunch meat also is another one, especially cured meats like ham tend to be extra high in salt versus like the turkey or the roast beef or the chicken. And then mixed meat and pasta dishes. So sort of like the one dish entrees like casseroles, those items tend to be high in salt as well. Pizza for a lot of different reasons, including the cheese and pepperoni. And then snack foods like chips, crackers, popcorn, and pretzels also tend to be high in salt. So just a couple of things to think about. And next slide, please. So some alternatives to enhancing the flavor of food. Mrs. Dash is actually a product that's used a lot in place of salt. So Mrs. Dash products were developed to coincide with the dietary approaches to stop hypertension, or the DASH diet, that started in 1994. And the DASH diet emphasizes fruits, vegetables, low-fat dairy foods, and limited red meat, saturated fats, and sweet intake. So just a little bit of background. They've got a lot of different products, and they even come in like single serve packets that we could give to clients so they can flavor the food to their liking. Other options are different herbs. I've got a few listed there, and there are some that pair well with different types of food than others. So potatoes tend to, sage, thyme, rosemary tend to go really good with potatoes. Chicken, for example, basil, dill, lemon juice, paprika, thyme also tend to go well with chicken. And then fish, lemon juice as well, onion, paprika, parsley. So lots of other herbs and seasonings that can help enhance the flavor of those foods in addition to salt, or without, in place of salt. Also pepper, so black pepper, white pepper, red pepper flakes. can also be used to enhance the flavor, not just to add spice, but to just enhance the flavor overall. And I wanted to point out too, as we get older, we tend to lose our taste buds, and they're not as powerful as they used to be. So the more flavor, the better in some cases. So all food doesn't always have to be bland. And then lemon juice and vinegar are good alternatives to salt as well. Next slide, please. So keeping with that, so going beyond different seasonings that can be used in place of salt, here are just a couple of other ways that we can cut back on salt. The first being using fresh ingredients whenever possible. And I know that's not always easy to do because of cost and, season, time of season, issues like that. But fresh meat, poultry, and seafood especially have more flavor and can taste good on their own with minimal seasoning. So just something to think about. And then making what you can from scratch. This kind of gives us the opportunity to control the amount of salt that goes into the food that we're serving. So rather than using prepackaged or pre-made foods, making what we can from scratch is always helpful. Another quick way that we can lower the salt content in foods is to drain any canned vegetables before using. I always recommend dumping the can into a colander and then just running the faucet over the vegetables and kind of making sure that you've gotten all of the contents of the can washed out, if that makes sense. That helps to limit a lot of the salt in that can. Another way is to purchase low salt or no sodium added products whenever possible, especially when it comes to lunch meat and cheeses and those types of things. And then also, in terms of other options that we give our clients to season foods, condiments can be very high in salt. Ketchup, especially soy sauce. So it's really important to limit the amount of condiments that we give to our clients to help control that sodium content. And the next slide is just the references that I used for this presentation today. And I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you all.
Thanks, Lauren. We appreciate it very much. Again, these information sessions are to be helpful to you. Just to give you some brief information, we will send the recording out. If you have questions regarding this, once you get the link, please email us back, and any questions that we have, we'll get those to Catherine and Lauren. We appreciate your time today. We know you're very busy, and we'll see you next time on Information Tuesday. Thank you.